Are you buying real estate the old way? Because that's about to go extinct. This new method actually allows you to purchase property with no money out of pocket. In some cases, you even get paid to purchase that property, and barely anybody's talking about it. So before I get into this method, real quick, I'm going to go over some key stats just so you can understand kind of what's the overall picture of the market right now, like the real estate market as a whole at a national level. So as far as key stats, this is as of May of this year, 2025. So the stats that are coming out is we've actually got a 35% gap between what's the sellers that are on the market versus the buyers. So the buyers are 35% less than what is actually on the market today. That's a pretty substantial gap. Now, what exactly does this mean? That means sellers are spending much more time on the market, so more days on market when they're trying to list their property. Some sellers are not selling their property because there's just not enough demand to actually purchase that property. Well, the demand's probably there, but let's talk about the factors that go into this. So one of the heavy impacts right here is the rate. So the 30-year fixed rate right now, it's approximately sitting at 6.8%, which over the last 50 years, you'd say, okay, that's not terrible. However, back when rates were 6.8% way back in the day, housing prices were substantially less. So with the national median home price right now, it's at about $414,000. So this is bringing in some affordability stress on consumers or home buyers. What I mean by that is the median mortgage payment is approximately 24% of the average household income. This is substantially higher than what it was previously, like pre-pandemic area, where it was about 14% of your household income. And then add insult to injury, the lender requirements are getting that much more stringent to where people are just not getting qualified to purchase homes. They don't have a sufficient income to purchase the homes at the price they're at today with the amount that their monthly payment's going to be at that higher interest rate. Now, if you're looking at kind of a comparison on how big of an impact these interest rates are, I do have prior videos, you can take a look at those. But another thing impacting this is our supply. Even though there's more sellers than buyers, our supply is still technically down. It's still low. So we've got 4 to 4.5 months supply, and that's about 16% below what it was pre-pandemic. So in 2017, 2019 era, around there. And additionally, so professionals in this space, so loan originators, they're actually exiting the field because they're not getting enough business to stay in business, a lot of them. Then you have realtors. So last year, 1 in 4 realtors, so that's 25% of realtors, actually sold a home last year. What does that mean? That means 75% of realtors did not sell one home last year. And because of that, they are exiting the field in droves. Again, there's the high days on market, and even investors. A lot of investors these days, they are sitting on the sidelines. Now, there's still obviously investors out there, but the thing is, the people that are sitting on the sidelines, or the investors sitting on the sidelines, they are very likely not aware of the strategy that I'm about to go over with you. Because guys, the whole reason I'm bringing all this up is, one, yes, you need to understand what are the stressors that are current in today's market on a national, like broad perspective. What is the outlook looking like? You go through this and it looks kind of grim. The fact of the matter is, I don't care what market you're in. It doesn't matter what the outlook of the market looks like. There is always a way to make money in that real estate market. There is always a creative strategy that you can deploy. And this is actually going to be one of them that is going to be a very effective tool that you can utilize today. And it's not only going to help you, but it will also help the realtors involved. It will help the sellers involved, because again, these realtors are not selling homes, so they're not making commissions. You can accommodate it where they're making commissions. And then these sellers, they're not selling their home. Well, with this strategy, you're going to be able to purchase that home, and they will actually be able to sell it, and likely for the purchase price that they're looking for. So with that, let's get into it. But first, let's go over kind of what is the overall, if you're like at a high level, as far as you're just going out and purchasing a piece of real estate, what does that structure look like from an investor perspective? So really, this is you, the investor buyer. So initially, you're going to go out to some type of institution. You are going to get financing, so get approved for financing. In a lot of the cases for an investor loan, it's going to be a DSCR, so debt service coverage ratio loan. In that instance, really, it's just a loan based off of the performance of the property. That's kind of that's how they lend to you. That's kind of their requirements. Still, they check on your credit score, obviously, to get like a better gauge on what interest rate they're going to give you. However, the loan's not going to be approved off of what your income is. It's going to be the performance of the asset you're actually acquiring. So typically in this state, you're going to have a DSCR Right now, they're running around 75% LTV. So what that means is these DSCR lenders, they are bringing 70 to 75% of the purchase price to the table, and then you bring the down payment for the rest. So roughly 20, 25%. So then you have a purchase and sale agreement. You agree on a price with a seller. You find a home, you agree on that price, you get the terms in there. And then from there, once you've signed on the dotted line, both of you, it's actually executed. You are going to go into what's called an escrow process. Now, a lot of this, we're not going to talk about all of the specifics in here. There's a lot that goes on within this escrow process, but this is where like your inspections, your due diligence, all that happens. But the thing is, within this escrow process, it's going to be either at a title company or it's going to be with like some type of title attorney on most cases. So within that escrow process, you're going through that. Then you get to the point where you get the clear to close from not only your lender, but also the title company. The deed's clear, like the title's actually clear. You're good to go and actually purchase. Then you have your close of escrow. At that point in time, the deed transfers to you, the investor, the buyer, or whatever LLC or entity that you're purchasing it with, and the transaction's complete. The funds go to the seller, deed transfers. Now that's the process at a high level. Now, one thing, when you're an investor, really you're going after one of two things. So either you are going after one, appreciation. So you're looking for long-term appreciation of that property. How much is it going to make over the long term? Say you hold it for 5, 10 years. What is that spread you're going to get when you sell it that far down the line? And then the other thing you're looking at is cash flow. These are really the two camps that you typically fall in as an investor. So when you're talking about appreciation, you're getting a lot of your money at the entry point, as far as you're really focused on what that purchase price is. So if you get a really good deal on that purchase price, that means you're going to have a lot more built-in equity. And then you could potentially, in certain situations, maybe force appreciation, so on and so forth. Again, you're really focused on this purchase price. Cash flow, not so much. Yes, obviously you're factoring in appreciation to a point, but if you're really focused on just cash flow, this is also a good strategy for that. So the reason why I bring that up is in this instance right here. So if you are putting 25% down, if you're in the investor world, putting down that much cash, it's not feasible to continue to scale at that. Like you're not going to be able to scale to a large portfolio if you're consistently having to bring that much money to the table. So what are we going to do in this type of transaction? So the transaction that I'm going to go over is called a seller carryback. People also know it as a stack method, a Marby method. It's called many different things, but for sake of examples, it's a seller carryback. And keep in mind before I go over this, guys, so this is, if you're a brand new investor getting into the space, this is a very complex transaction and it's not something you want to do for your first deal. This is for investors that you've purchased a couple homes, like maybe 1, 2, you're familiar with cash flows, you're familiar with how you make money in real estate. This is going to be an awesome strategy for you. But if you're just getting into the game, there are risks associated with this, which I'll get to at the end of the video, but you do want to make sure you're factoring those in. This is not a beginner strategy, so keep that in mind. So within the seller carryback structure, what are we doing? So instead of this down payment coming from you, you actually go to what's called a transactional funder, transactional lender. Some people call it a transactional private money lender. Again, they go by many names. I do the transactional funding. That's what I do as a business, as one of my businesses. So in this case, this down payment right here, what happens in this case is you actually have a transactional funder come into play. So we'll say TF. So a transactional funder is actually going to come in and fund this entire down payment. So let's go through some numbers examples. So say we've got a $425K purchase price. And this DSCR lender, they've got, say, a 75% loan to value, so LTV. So that's going to bring this at approximately, we got $319K as money that they're going to bring for that purchase price. Now, with that, you are going to have, say, let's see, that's $106K down payment. That's going to be funded by us, the transactional funder. Now, you go through this transaction. Now, you look at this. So as far as the seller, more often than not, they're going to have some underlying loan. They're not going to maybe own it full outright. Obviously, there's situations where they do own the house completely outright. This works for that as well, but it also works if they do have an underlying loan. let's say in this instance, which is maybe a little more common. So say the seller has 250K approximately. So 250K in an underlying loan that needs to be paid off. So out of that, when you take a look into that, this seller, really their equity is the difference from the purchase price to what they owe on the home. So you look at that equity, the seller's equity is around, so we'll do this, minus that, brings us to 175K. So 175K equity. And I'll tell you why that's important here in a little bit. So in this instance, they have that equity. Now, what happens in this case, so you get that approval from that DSCR lender. That's the same in that instance. Well, then you also have the transactional funder where they're going to bring that down payment. That way you're not bringing any money into the deal. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, I still had to pay for that down payment. No, you actually pay for that with a note coming from the seller. So it's actually going to be the seller carrying back a portion of their equity, or they're carrying back a portion of the purchase price to fund and like actually pay that down payment back. So let's walk through this. So we've got transactional funder coming in with the down payment. Again, you get the terms agreed to with the seller to where, hey, if I give you a larger down payment, say 50%, 60%, would you be willing to seller carry the remainder of your equity in the property on a secondary lien? So what's going to happen here is this is going to be two legs to this transaction. You're going to have kind of your traditional process, and then after that, you are going to have a second lien on the property. To place that on the property, again, the main primary lien, first position is going to be a DSCR. Second lien leveraged against that property is going to be a seller carry back. So say in this instance, say you're carrying back, let's give you an example of where you could actually get this carryback structured to where you are making money on this, to where you're actually buying a house and getting paid to buy that house. And guys, this happens all the time. We go through 5+ deals like this a month, and there are instances where the buyer actually does get money back as like an acquisition fee. Or maybe it's a house that needs significant repair. Maybe that's in the negotiation. That's why they get that fee back, is it's substantial enough to where they can do the repairs. They like lump it into one. So instead of getting a gap loan outside of this, they can lump it all into one seller carry. So again, you have the seller carry back. Say in this instance, they carry back approximately, say, 130. So we got 130K here. Now this 130K, this secondary lien, essentially what this seller is doing is they're getting the full purchase price at close of escrow. And out of that purchase price, that cash that they're getting, they're literally just becoming the bank right after that, and then lending a portion of those funds back to you, the buyer. So and that's really how this works. It's kind of similar to how if you were to get a HELOC on a home, kind of similar to that in a sense, except in that case, you're going to a bank to get the HELOC. So how does this work? You get that secondary lien. These funds, again, because you're putting the lien in place to secure the seller, but those funds are then going back to the investor to pay off. So in this instance, we've got this. You've got the 106 that's going back, 106K. So the principal that's going back to this transactional funder plus the fee. So on average, so roughly, say this plus fees, it's probably going to equate to around 108. Let's say 109 for good measure, just to give you an idea there. So 109 is going back to the transactional funder to pay them off plus their fees to get into the deal. Now with that remains, out of that seller carry of 130, again, you've got 109 going there. And then coming here this is going to be approximately a 20K, we'll call this an acquisition fee. So in this instance, you are literally getting paid 20 grand. Again, I'm rounding these numbers, but you're literally getting paid 20 grand to purchase this asset. Now tell me how that is not awesome. That is phenomenal. Like, this strategy is so awesome. But the thing is, so there are instances in this where you do have to be aware of, maybe it's an instance where you do have to pay a little bit. But I guarantee you, like all the instances that we've seen, it's definitely less than 5% that you're putting down on that property, like 5% of the property's value that you're putting into the deal. So it's still an awesome deal from a cash flow perspective, because again, you're making your money on the purchase. So, and you're making your cash flow based off of how much money are you putting in at the purchase of this asset. So this just increases your cash on cash returns through the roof, and it makes this purchase very attractive. Then you can then turn around and take that money that you acquired as a fee to go back in and make improvements on the property, or you can use it to buy the next property. This, guys, is how you scale in this business. This is awesome. Now, again, this isn't going to work out in every scenario. You got to keep that in mind. This is a tool, so it needs to make sense. It needs to make sense for the seller. There's other tools that you can utilize, such as a full seller finance, or maybe you could use like a subject to type transaction where you are taking over the payments on the note for that property, and then maybe you're seller financing the later portion of that. Again, there are many tools in this arena that you can utilize. But the thing is, this is awesome. Now we're going to get into kind of the gotchas. What are the risks? So this is where you've got to know, what are your risks? So main risk here is over leveraged. And I'll tell you what I mean here. And this is where you need to understand from an investor side of things that you really shouldn't be a beginner going into this. Because if you are over leveraged on a property, now say, again, we've got a $425,000 purchase price. So this is what the home is currently selling on the market. That's what it's worth, $425,000. So keep that in mind. That's the purchase price. You add this carryback plus the DSCR loan. So these two loans right here, and guess what that makes? That makes combined. So you've got the seller carry here at 130, put SC for seller carry, and then you've got the DSCR for 319, DSCR. So the loans that you as the buyer have on that property actually equates to around $449K. That's more than the purchase price. So you are over leveraging that property. So if you were to sell it, you would actually lose money. If you were to turn around and sell it right away, you would actually lose money. So this is something that you want to go into eyes wide open. It's not an appreciation play. You are not going to appreciate that quickly. Maybe you're going to have to hold on to it like 3-5 years, maybe 10 years. Again, keep in mind, because we've seen structures where this is where they're over leveraging the property a pretty substantial amount, and that appreciation, it's going to take a fair amount of time to get to that point. So keep in mind, again, you are over leveraging these properties. So you need to go in, because especially if you're not familiar with all the expenses that are associated with a property, and say you can't handle it and then you have to offload it, well, guess what? You are going to lose money on that sale because you didn't know what you were doing going into it. So keep that in mind. Don't be stupid. Don't do this if you are not experienced. So number two is fraud. Big no-no. So why do I bring up fraud? Is if you do not do this appropriately, if you do not structure this appropriately, if you do not fund it appropriately, where all parties are privy to the transaction, aware, you are committing mortgage fraud. So you need to make sure that the lenders are fully aware of what you're doing, and you need to make sure that they understand, again, how you are involved, what your involvement in the full transaction is. That way they can sign off on it and you're good to go. Now, I've seen people where they fund these and they are not above the book at all. They're funding these with, say, gift letters, stuff like that. That's a huge no-no. You are 100% committing fraud in that instance. So that's why we are very transparent in the way we operate. And guess what? When we are funding these deals, we're not only funding them in a transparent way and making sure we're above board, but in addition to that, if you're not familiar with the paperwork, which is completely fair, say you've got the agreed upon terms with the seller, but you just don't know how to structure the paperwork so that way everybody's protected appropriately. Well, guess what? We have a service where we will actually have a TC team that they coordinate this whole transaction. They'll make sure all the necessary documents are in place, the necessary promissory note. We have a closing attorney that does the second leg of the transaction. That way it's streamlined. It's consistent. As of right now, as long as the title is clear and the lender gives clear to close, we have a 100% success rate at accomplishing this type of transaction. And we are doing it at definitely in a very economical price. And I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. But again, make sure if you are deploying this, don't come to me. I don't want to put you in a bad situation if you're not familiar with what these risks, like why these are risks. If you're not familiar in real estate, I don't want to put you in a bad situation. So please Only come to me if you're an experienced investor, because this is an awesome strategy, but you need to know the risks going into it. Again, going back to this outlook on the market, where you're talking about the realtors, you're talking about the seller. Again, this is going to solve the seller's problem where they are going to be able to sell that property. With this structure, 100%. This is a very good solution for them to where they're actually not going to be put in a bind where maybe they really need to sell it. They need to pay something else off. This is something where you are helping them out. And then the realtor in this, when we do this transactional funding portion, you could even negotiate in the deal where we're actually paying for the realtor's commission on this selling side. So you could help the seller out from that perspective. Again, with these creative type of transactions, it's kind of what you make. It's really up to your imagination to a point. So you can not only help out the sellers in this situation, you can help out a realtor. Again, make sure they're paid. Again, if it's not a part of this side, still they're going to get paid for the seller, but why not sweeten the deal and help them out in that manner as well? So this is going to help this portion right here, which that is awesome. I'm all about helping people. This is a really good strategy for that. Now, if you're ready to try this method or you want help structuring this method or applying this method in your deals, then definitely click on the link below for our transactional funding services, or check out my one-to-one consulting program where I'm going to help you leverage your retirement account by self-directing it in these types of products, helping you far exceed what Wall Street's going to do. You're going to do much better than what Wall Street's going to be able to give you. Or if you're just getting started, and again, this is an advanced strategy, so if you are just getting started and you need fast cash, watch the video up next where I will break down what I would do if I was needing to make 10K fast without a real estate license. So with that, I'll catch you on the next one.